$8 trillion. That number represents the global economic impact of cybercrime in 2023. And we're still doing the numbers on 2024. But to put that 8 trillion in perspective, right? I mean, the global annual healthcare spend in the US is $4 trillion, right? The US federal budget for 2023 was $6 trillion.
This is DOF Creations Service-Driven University. I'm Saeed Gordon. Here we discuss all things technology, focusing on leadership, policy, and practice, and the different ways that technologies continue to evolve to address the innovative and sometimes complex challenges that we're facing within this IT space. We appreciate you joining us here today and hope you enjoy. The idea that we had for this event was really around some of the things that we're seeing Palo Alto do to support customers, both on the side of firewalls and prevention, as well as an incident response and remediation. As we do different events focused on utilities, operational technology, different aspects of networking or cybersecurity, different customers have different challenges, and different manufacturers have different ways forward to try to help and support our customers. So we try to do this as a way to bring different options, different resources, and different perspectives to those that we work with, and hopefully we can provide something to our customers that will be able to help them in their day-to-day and give them something that maybe they didn't consider or think about previously. I think I would like our speakers to be able to, just introduce themselves quickly, and then we can go into the meat of our conversation. So I think, John, if you want to present the Palo team.
Hi, I'm John Shipley. I'm the Territory Sales Manager for Local Government. Today, we have our Security Director, Mike Spisak. He's from Unit 42, as well as our local Systems Engineer, Josh Conley, who supports local government for Palo Alto.
All right, thank you. And Gary, if you don't mind introducing yourself as representative from CISA and Homeland Security.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Gary Hopewell. I'm the cybersecurity advisor for Central Florida. So in that role, we support cybersecurity for federal government, state and local governments, and critical infrastructure partners across, like I said, all of Central Florida. So.
Absolutely. But Gary, I know that a lot of the materials you guys provide are national. So even though you're the Central Florida rep, there's still a lot of stuff that can be applied nationally to any customers of ours who might see this that are outside of Florida.
It's all national. Yep. Everything we do is we've got representatives across the entire country.
All right. Fantastic. Just a quick note about us at DOF. Of course, our motto is measuring success through service. If you see anything of ours, you'll see that motto kind of put everywhere. This event is in line with that. We're trying our best to make sure that we keep our customers informed about everything that's going on about there. There's so much happening. There's so much just in the day-to-day evolution of technology, different threats, different challenges. I think I saw from a budgetary perspective from COVID, we've had something like between like a 40 or 50% increase in costs as it relates to technology. So not just trying to address or try to prevent cyber attacks, but also trying to make sure that we can keep up with the cost of cybersecurity and the cost of security itself. There's just any number of new challenges that are facing the leaders that are in this space. So our goal is to try to provide help and assistance as much as we can. And one of the best ways to do that is to keep providing as much information as possible. So hopefully you're never caught off guard. Hopefully you're able to kind of see what's coming around the corner. And if we can be a part of that process, we're happy to be. Something that we recently put together at DOF just based on some of the solutions we've done, and I believe we have Viv Gordon on with us. She built out our financing options and our financing solutions for customers. John also worked with us on this as well and recently used this with a customer, which was a fairly large size sheriff's office. They needed to have the ability to make a large purchase, but also be able to offset those costs, not have to worry about making one big expenditure within this fiscal year, being able to stretch that out over multiple fiscal years. And then Viv and John worked together to make sure that that was done at 0% interest. Depending on the solution, depending on the situation, those options may or may not be available. So we try to make sure that we do a project by project review, let you know kind of what that solution would look like, what that procurement option could be, and then how we can work with you to make it as affordable and as flexible as possible. We've also expanded this to include include not just a single solution, but if you want to have a collection of solutions pulled together under one umbrella, turn it into one line item, and then also to make that more effective and more affordable for you. As we had just mentioned, the cost of technology, as we've seen from COVID to now, has skyrocketed. So we all have to work together to be very, very flexible, very, very creative, and to find new ways forward because, you guys are going to keep needing to have hardware refreshes, software refreshes, new technologies or emerging technologies that are responding to new and different challenges that come up. So from a finance perspective, from a budgetary perspective, the solution is all about flexibility. If you want to learn more, please reach out to us. And Viv Gordon is going to be doing some series specifically discussing budget, finances, and then obviously our grant resources that we do and how we can combine some of those to give folks a little bit of budgetary breathing room. From here, I do want to pass this back to John and the Palo Alto team. I know you guys wanted to discuss the things that you guys are doing from the perspective of AI. Of course, AI is being used every day. We've seen AI within technology prior to 2023, 2024, but now it's become kind of the hot buzzword. What we do see as the change as it pertains to AI is the way that AI is being leveraged more and more and more every single day by bad actors to make the process of trying to catch you or trying to trick you into something a lot easier for them. One of the big things that we're seeing now is invoice fraud, and invoice fraud has been on the rise, I would say, for the last year. One of the big things that we're seeing with invoice fraud and AI is how they're using that to create more immersive social phishing events and experiences. So they're going to, your procurement team, your finance team, or somebody in administration, building a relationship with them over the course of, 5 or 10 email exchanges back and forth, and then telling them, hey, you're behind on a vendor payment, send it to this new address or send it to this new account. So when we're talking about the different ways that AI can be leveraged for your defense, that's some of the things that we're looking at, some of the things that we want to make sure everybody's considering. AI is being used in new and creative ways as a way to attack you. What are some of the new and creative ways that we can use AI to try to defend you? John?
Thank you, Saeed. Yeah, I'm actually going to pass the ball over to Mike, who's subject matter expert from our Unit 42 division, to give a little bit of background about himself and give us some context in regard to what he's seeing with the AI in terms of attacks and how Palo Alto has been developing our technology for years, leveraging AI and machine learning to thwart off the enemies. You're muted, Mike, if you're talking.
There we go. I was just looking for my mute button. I'm on Microsoft Teams, so sorry about that. Just kind of getting used to the environment here. Can everyone hear me okay? And can you see my screen that hopefully says how AI is transforming the threat landscape? Just give me a thumbs up or a yes or audible. Okay, you're seeing that. Great, thanks. I appreciate that. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this topic, and thanks for that introduction. Before I talk about myself, I just want to throw a number out there to everyone, just to put things into a little bit of perspective. And that number is $8 trillion. And I kind of like to open with that. I am a bit of a stats head, as you'll see in some of the visuals I'm going to share with you, because I think statistics and stats and numbers are important to put things in perspective, but also are good attention grabbing mechanisms. So again, let that sink in. $8 trillion. That number represents the global economic impact of cybercrime in 2023. And we're still doing the numbers on 2024, but to put that 8 trillion in perspective, right? I mean, the global annual healthcare spend in the US is $4 trillion, right? The US federal budget for 2023 was $6 trillion. And the combined annual GDP of countries like Japan and Germany combined, right, which are among the larger global economies in the world, right, are just about $9 trillion. So, again, you think about that, $8 trillion. And we're experiencing attacks that are at a scale and a level of sophistication and at a pace that we really haven't seen before. And it really doesn't matter how large or small, you are, or your customers are, or what industry you're in. If you have an asset, you're going to be targeted. And while this is frustrating, and you'll also learn this hopefully about me during this presentation, is that I'm a bit of an optimist as well. I believe that with the right approaches, we can sort of overcome the scale, sophistication, and speed that we're seeing adversaries move at. So we're going to dive a little deeper into this. But who am I? So my name's Mike Spisak. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you guys today. I am a technical managing director of proactive security at Palo Alto Networks in Unit 42. And I focus on building and delivering next generation proactive cybersecurity solutions. So if you think about Unit 42, 10 seconds on this. Unit 42, we're sort of known as the eyes and the ears of Palo Alto Network. We're the boots on the ground. And the name Unit 42 is sort of a tip of the hat to Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where 42 is the answer to everything. While I recognize that that number may not be the answer to all of your cybersecurity challenges, I do believe that our organization represents and has a lot of great intelligence, and everything we can bring forward will hopefully answer a lot of questions for you during this presentation, specifically as it relates to artificial intelligence. 10 more seconds on Unit 42. I think what makes us unique as well is that we're generally known for our incident response, but we're also known for our threat intelligence. And I mentioned I come from proactive security, so I'm sort of left of boom, right? So I'm over on the far side of this particular diagram. But if you take the three legs of the stool and you take our managed services, you take our proactive security, take our reactive security, and you wrap all of this with threat intelligence, and then we like to think of it, this sort of triangle with bidirectional arrows moving between all these components. And that's what I think makes our portfolio so amazing, is that we've taken everything we learned from responding to incidents, everything we learned from helping customers avoid incidents, everything we understand about what's happening in the environment, in the underworld from threat intel, and we infuse all of that into our portfolio. And each of our components takes advantage of that. So that's all I'll say about us. I just wanted to give you a little bit of perspective of, sort of the veneer or the lens we look through when we are looking at things like AI, just as one example. But we look at lots of things: ransomware, we look at cyber criminal activity, we look at exfiltration methods, we look at lateral movement, and so on. And we've been really, I in particular, have been looking at AI. I think it's important also sort of understand, we've been looking at this for a long time. I think Saeed said it well, right? We've seen AI and ML in technologies before 2023 and earlier. I've been working with AI probably for the better part of a decade in the forms of deep learning, machine learning models. We've been infusing, and I say we, I mean the industry of cybersecurity, have been infusing machine learning models into cybersecurity practice for a long time, because it did a lot of really cool things for us. It helped us do anomaly detection. It helped us do user behavior interaction. It allowed us to look at large data sets and say, well, and pick out the patterns that are hiding within them, and identify, again, anomalies or potential attacks. Do a little bit of predictive analysis, but that stuff has gotten so much better as things have, as the technology's evolved. I think what's also sort of important that now we're seeing AI emerging as a powerful threat, right? So that's the other side of the coin. I'm going to talk about both sides of the coin because I think it is important to have balance here. And in the next couple of slides, I'm going to talk a little bit about the aspects of the AI threat landscape, both operational risk as well as attacks and defense. But when we talk about AI threats, again, it's important to understand that AI being used operationally by adversaries, but it's also, I think, how we see attackers are actually attacking AI as well. So that's what I mean about the AI challenge. Is it's multidimensional, and I kind of want to bring some of that out in the talk today. So again, a little bit more on stats. I think this is interesting. There's a couple of statistics here, and the comment I like to make about this is, as soon as one of these statistics sort of slides emerges, they're almost immediately out of date within a week, and sometimes even within a day, right? This one in particular, you'll see employee shadow AI use. 55% of employees use public Gen AI almost weekly. I just saw a stat the other day that said it's 57% now, right? And I chuckle about that a little because, I did a talk recently and I was in a room and I asked people to raise their hands. I said, how many people, not for cyber or, how many people are just using generative AI in their day-to-day work. And pretty much every hand went up in a room of about 200 people. Almost everyone raised their hand about using some kind of generative AI. And when I talk about shadow AI, and I'll talk more about that in a minute, but this is the idea of employees using AI that's potentially not sanctioned, right? And that could come in the form of just someone using, and I hate to name names, but just using tools like Grammarly, or using tools like, photo manipulation tools, or just, our friends at ChatGPT or Gemini, and just interacting with it on a casual basis. And even going so far as to developers and engineers deploying models that are, out on the, out in your environments. And so a lot of those models are unsanctioned. So shadow AI, like shadow IT, comes in many different flavors. We also talk about attacks on these AI apps, models, and data. Now, by using and leveraging unsanctioned or shadow AI, exposes you. 70% of enterprises will have operationalized AI architectures. And again, I saw a stat recently that said 85% of enterprises are going to expand their AI operations just in this next year, right? And a lot of them are going to use open source models. So what does that mean? That means they're going to go out and maybe not necessarily use a sanctioned model like ChatGPT that may or may not be sanctioned for your use. They may go out and download an open source model from tools like Hugging Face or some of these other areas, which, by the way, have compromised models. Yes, models can be compromised, and if they make their way into it's almost as if not more dangerous than a phishing email making its way into your inbox. Imagine having a model making its way onto your cloud infrastructure, and that model could be compromised in some way. So a little bit more technical about that in a minute, but just to understand the risks. Yeah.
Something I forgot to mention to everyone, as Mike and Gary speak, please make sure to include your questions in the chat. And we're going to have about 10 minutes after each of them speak for Q&A. So I want to make sure that everybody can get their questions answered and no one feels, rushed or pressured to get something out there.
Yeah, no, thanks, Diane. I appreciate that. Yeah, please give questions. And guys, I'm over coming at you live from New York, and I'm caffeinated, so it's why it may seem like I'm throwing a lot at you. It's sort of the rate and pace that I speak sometimes. But feel free to drop your questions in chat, please. We want to make sure we can address all of that. So, getting back to the expanded attack surface, right? We're talking about the explosion of Gen AI, and again, I mentioned it. Not only is it happening, for all of our employees and all of our engineers, it's also happening right down to our living rooms, right, personally, as well as out in our clouds. And I mentioned this, a quick example. I was doing an AI scan for a client not that long ago, and I was looking across their AWS environment, and I found over 2,000, I think it was like 2,400 instances of something called Amazon Poly, and which is, and if you're not familiar, Amazon Poly is sort of this cloud-based service that converts text into lifelike speech. It's capable of doing things like file transfers. It has some known vulnerabilities, but it's known to be used to do things like deepfakes and other types of technologies. Now, client had no idea they had over 2,000 instances of it running, and after an investigation, we revealed that it was just a configuration switch buried inside a build that they had. So every time they were building an image, Amazon Poly was the service was getting installed and going out with that instance. So they had over 2,000 of them sort of running in the environment that they didn't know about, right? So just another example of how you could inadvertently be exposing yourself to risk, leveraging tools like this that you're just unaware of. Very important, very exciting space, but just, also, I'll use a term a mentor of mine used to say, running with scissors, right? Is sort of this idea that comes to mind when we talk about the explosion of generative AI when it comes to our clouds. And again, just engineers, architects wanting to do good, wanting to accelerate, wanting to innovate, but potentially exposing the enterprise to risks that I believe we can mitigate. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But so just sort of summarize, right? Again, shadow AI, right? Unsanctioned AI, sort of the presence, of AI across your environment, but the absence of inventory and visibility is very, very dangerous. Risk associated with governance, right? Acceptable use policies, which lead to misconfiguration, over-reliance, and a whole host of other types of things that happen. For example, sensitive data oversharing, data poisoning, model theft. I mean, there's a whole number of things that happen with the expanded risk surface or attack surface that AI brings in. And then, of course, sort of this data exposure, right? Not having visibility into AI pipelines, unknowingly exposing potential confidential data. Data exposure leads to unauthorized data access, and that leads to cyber attackers getting to your data pools, and also, inadvertently poisoning information. So there's just lots of entry points here that we need to have visibility and awareness to. All right, so I think we have a good sense of the problem statement. The challenge is now over on the other side, when we're looking at adversaries. I think we all see the promise of AI from our respective industries. We see the promise of AI. Again, I mentioned velocity and accelerating innovation and, capitalizing on market share and growth. So attackers see the promise of AI as well, right? And I mentioned Unit 42, we do a lot with threat intelligence. We do a lot with monitoring adversaries. We do a lot in tracking activities. And so here's a couple of examples I want to talk through about how we see adversaries using AI. And, I want to put some realism around it, right? Because we hear a lot of, doom and gloom, what we call FUD, which is the fear and uncertainty and doubt. So I want to kind of talk a little, and I'm going to add a little crispness to these conversations so you get a sense of what we are seeing. So we do see, and it really comes in three flavors, and I'll talk about all three. But the first is acceleration of attacks, right? So we absolutely see cyber criminals. And I'm going to go soft on the word evidence. I'm just going to say we see presence of activity where AI is being experimented with, and it's being used to I would say active experimentation is probably the way I would characterize that. And so again, Saeed mentioned earlier about invoice fraud as being one area where I'll talk about that, but sort of a derivative of that is where you'll see I think the low-hanging fruit is easier phishing, right? So gone are the days of the infamous hallmarks of a phishing email where you have bad grammar, strange greetings, misspelled names, confusing high priority requests. And so those are the infamous hallmarks of what of classic phishing. And we're starting to see advances in the phishing space, specifically leveraging generative AI to craft more persuasive spear phishing emails and campaigns. They're very creative, using deepfake type content or amplifying risk to organizations. But it makes it really difficult, even for savvy, cybersecurity professionals, to differentiate between a legitimate email and one that's potentially phishing, right? Which, again, leaving sort of a lot of organizations exposed. The good news is that spam filters are still really pretty good at identifying fraudulent IP addresses or kind of identifying, the differences between, when something's coming from strange domains or when they're spoofing the from address in these type of campaigns. So these will still get caught in spam filters and phishing filters, but the other area where we're starting to see this showing itself is in business email compromise. So this becomes a lot more dangerous because business email compromise is about sounding natural and building trust. So when we're starting to see an attack where an adversary may gain access to an inbox and they would use AI to analyze I'll just call it the voice of someone that they want to impersonate. So the ability to write emails in the likeness of sounding like it comes from Mike, right? And then sending, after scanning those emails, perform in-context training to learn how a user writes emails and then mimic that quote unquote voice in emails in order to carry on dialogues. And we'll start to see this in more targeted attacks and spear phishing. The other area that I get asked about is automated malware development. And so I've seen this in laboratory type environments, where a lab controlled environment or proof of concepts where we've seen making generative AI applications, write malware, right? And, or in some cases, tricking, having, an adversary trick a well-intentioned large language model into writing a keystroke logger, right? For the benefit of teaching people how to do things, right? Trying to sort of twist the narrative. So it's worth mentioning that a lot of these language models have ethical guidelines and what we call guardrails built into them, which sort of prevent this type of behavior. But there's a constant revolving door in this space of adversaries who are trying to do what we call jailbreak large language models to force them into doing things, by various methods like token smuggling and misdirection and all of that, which I won't get into. But there's evidence, there's activity in this space of people trying to take models, train them for nefarious purposes. Not a lot of that activity yet, and the reason is because it takes a lot of compute, takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of skill. And those are things that typically adversaries avoid. They want low-hanging fruit and they want easy access. Another area, right, is I mentioned scale. So scale is another area where we're starting to see AI's ability, and we're predicting that AI's ability to automate processes. We're going to see adversaries shifting away from having a few slow, covert type of campaigns into higher targeted, fast-paced campaigns in order to overwhelm defenders. So we've seen this in the past where, just hundreds of millions, and in the likeness of like a DDoS attack. So we've seen these tactics before, but I think what you'll start to see is campaigns are going to move away from being sort of the shotgun blast approach where we'll spray hundreds of thousands of people with, on a campaign and hope that one hits, sort of laced with randomness. And we'll start to see this sort of move into the possibility of more precision and focused and targeted. So imagine a case like SolarWinds, that attack, which was very targeted and very precise and very, very specific. Could you imagine an attack like that at scale, right? So that would be very, 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 very dangerous. So we're keeping an eye on that type of activity. We want to make sure we understand what's possible and what's plausible in these spaces. There's also, if you think about it, right, think about all the CVEs that are out there in the world, tens of thousands of vulnerabilities that are out there. And it's very difficult for an attacker to try to understand which of these vulnerabilities can be weaponized in a reasonable amount of time. So imagine a point where, adversaries could leverage AI to scan all these different vulnerabilities and identify which ones could be 0 days, which ones could be weaponized, how to write code to weaponize it, and so on, right? So this is another area where scale of attacks needs to be watched very carefully in the context of AI. And then the last one I'll talk about is success, right? So adversaries will get more success if they have a wider attack surface to go after, right? And they have newer things to attack. So with generative AI and the world of AI in itself opens up new categories of vulnerabilities, LLMs, as I already mentioned, which sort of, or just Gen AI in general sort of opens up this new attack surface. In fact, if you go and you look at the OWASP AI top 10 or the LLM top 10. There's, organizations like NIST, MITRE ATT&CK, MITRE Atlas, and so on, right? They talk about all these new attack surfaces. So I think what we'll start to see is that there's going to be a whole new category of vulnerabilities that AI is going to introduce, right? And with, and you can, anytime you introduce new technologies, you introduce new risks. So that's one area of it. The other is in the area of impersonation. I mentioned deep fakes before, but this is an area where we're going to start to see more. And again, I think it's accessibility. With a reasonably powered gaming computer, right? You can create a deep fake, which is pretty convincing. In fact, and a quick laugh here, and this is sort of the lighter side of things. I just got off a Zoom call before this call where I had a colleague who was demonstrating deepfakes live through a Zoom, through a web conference interaction, and he was changing his face dynamically to a variety of different well-known actors and actresses. I won't say who, right? And so in real time, his face was changing, and it was quite convincing. And it was using low grade, low grade gaming computer, medium sized gaming computer, I would say, but just harvesting images off the internet. And he was wearing glasses. He was able to move his glasses on and off his face. In fact, he was changing lighting using his phone, and it was quite convincing. And so impersonation is a very inexpensive. In fact, we've even seen where you've seen ransomware as a service. There is deepfake as a service. So for as little as a couple of bucks, and some reasonably, low quality images, you can get yourself a deepfake.
Excuse me,
And in
Mike.
fact, we're seeing, yep.
I'll add to that. We recently saw, and I think we reposted to our LinkedIn a couple months back, somebody in finance was requested to release funding, and the way that the bad actors got around their suspicions, they sent them a Teams meeting and had them join a Teams meeting with like 10 people on it. All 10 people were either a deep fake or the bad actor that was, like you're saying, impersonating someone who's legit. And something that, of course, I have to make sure I tell my team members about, because there's so much DOF content with my face and my voice on it, is I'm not going to send you a request by text message. I'm not even going to send you a request over the phone. We're going to have a process in place where it comes from an email first, then we talk about it, then we go back and make sure that it's approved of, and it's going to have to be, a signature or something like that. But if it's any type of funds, we've had team members get requested for funds personally from me. So anything like that, if your city, county, school district, whoever it is, and your superintendent, mayor, the CFO has done speaking events, that's something to be aware of, that now their face and their voice are out there and could be used in a deepfake.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. In fact, and that's a great example. So thanks for sharing that. I'll give you a quick personal example, but you're absolutely right. Same, right? I do podcasts, I do webinars like this. My face is out there as well. I've had, and we're cyber professionals, and I've had my colleagues, through SMS, smishing, phishing, all the various, right? And even on a personal level, my mother was called, a couple of months ago, from the voice of what sounded like my nephew, right? Her grandson, who had been in a horrible accident. I know we've heard about these. We've probably heard stories about these. I don't know if anyone else has had an actual case where it's affected you personally, but this was a case where it affected us personally, where my mother was traumatized thinking that her grandson had been in a car accident and needed funds to get out of jail. I mean, it was the narrative was so strong and so demanding, and the voice was quite convincing. After a little bit of investigation, we found that his voice was sampled from an in-game play off an Xbox, off of in-game chatter off Xbox, right? And what's amazing is, it only takes I think the numbers now with compute, the numbers are something like 10 seconds. It may even be less, but only a few seconds of your voice are required in order to get a halfway convincing, sound bite, right, to imitate your voice. It's scary. So yes, to your point, Syed, we even had to have a family process, a family password that we had to communicate to each other to prevent. So yes, it's affecting on personal levels, it's affecting us on professional levels, and it's affecting us at the organization and corporate wide. So be on the lookout. Thanks for sharing that. Incredible. Right, so I'm going to flip the script a little bit. Security, right? AI can help with security as well, right? I mean, we've seen, and again, Saeed mentioned this before, I mentioned as well, we've seen machine learning models, and at Palo Alto Networks, we've had machine learning in our, operationalized in our platforms for quite some time across our security operations, across our firewalls, across our cloud instances, where we've used machine learning models to do, again, I mentioned anomaly detection, what's different, right? Supercharging security teams to be more efficient and effective. I really feel like the left side of this is AI really shines as far as helping security teams accelerate time to triage, identifying false positives, false negatives, things like that, and then blocking attacks without human intervention. We're seeing more and more of this. I've been automating, things my entire career, and automation has always been, this crawl, walk, run type of journey, right? You don't want, a lot of my clients, and whoa, I don't want to fully automate, always have a human oversight. But we're starting with the speed, scale, and sophistication of attacks increasing. We're starting to see and trust our abilities in our data models and on our machine learning models and in our AI to block attacks without human intervention. This is an area where we're seeing more and more automation starting to shine. And so, we're always looking for new ways to help our clients to penetrate, to prevent adversaries from penetrating their infrastructure, trying to find new ways to leverage, help them take the mountains of data that they have, the telemetry they have, and put it to work for them through these machine learning models. So we do believe AI can really help and shine in these areas. But in the future, AI needs to, and security teams need to constantly evolve. And this evolution needs to be in real time. We have to be able to detect, anomalies at speed and then stop them in their tracks. We have to be able to analyze threats on the fly. We have to be able to mitigate and neutralize, and in some cases, without having to get humans involved, and then only triage and escalate the really important ones that require, a skilled analyst to be able to, to apply their knowledge and their background into those types of events, right? Just funneling out the noise, taking care of a lot of the, the blocking and the tackling. And it's going to be a journey. I mentioned the crawl, walk, run. That journey continues. And I think that it's going to take time. And as a cybersecurity industry, we're close, but there's still a lot more work to do. It's not where infrastructure from a security perspective can just sort of be born and be secure. And we talk about shift left, we talk about security as code, and we talk about, and I go and I speak with engineers and architects all the time about how do we move security further, how do we pull it more to the left to make it a part of to make everyone a part of, and make that sort of future a reality today. So, we'll see a lot of this type of activity that's happening. And you'll hear us at, Palo Alto Networks and Unit 42 talk about something that we call precision AI. And, what we've discovered is generative AI is amazing, but it's not enough by itself. Machine learning models are amazing. Deep learning models, and if you're familiar with the difference between, deep learning models and neural networks and layers, and again, I could geek out there, but I won't go deep. But it's really what we found is that when you bring the best of all these worlds together, I think, you take the deep learning neural network type of models, you take the machine learning models, which have mountains of data and anomaly detection and predictive analytics, and then you combine that with generative AI that speaks human. So, so humans don't have to necessarily speak security or speak technology, right? And you bring the three of these together, and at the the intersection of them, you have, just this amazing capability to provide accuracy and to provide action. And, even when we talk about bringing co-pilots into a security product, generative AI alone is not going to be enough. It needs to be armed and harnessing the power of the deep learning and the machine learning models that are available to it, just not only from a product set, but also from it understanding your environment. So we believe precision AI is going to really drive real outcome future, the future of harnessing AI for the power of good. And again, right, this is going to sort of the punchline, right? Spoiler alert. It's going to really help us do some cyber resilience. Now, I'm tight on time, so I'm going to accelerate a little bit, but I just think that the last thing I kind of want to mention is what I'm seeing. Sorry, I mentioned co-pilots, so I will talk about co-pilots super quick here, but we do believe co-pilots are going to surface as major value add inside cybersecurity. And you'll start to see co-pilots surface across our own portfolio. And not only, I think, help answer questions about, how do I do this and how do I do that? And you're seeing that a lot with like code co-pilots, where a developer will say, how do I write a for loop, or how do I, write code? But we'll start to see, how do I use this product? And I think it'll even go a step further when it's like, not only how do I configure this firewall, or how do I use, how do I run this report, but it would be, let me go ahead and do that for you. Or let me recommend an operational playbook that will help you avoid this issue in the future, right? So, things like in-product case creation, I think, is a hotspot. Detecting product issues, things like that, and troubleshooting. So you'll see classic co-pilot type of experiences, but I think you're going to see new and exciting use cases, specifically in the cybersecurity industry, where co-pilots are going to shine and help make better optimized use of the portfolio.
Excuse me, Mike. If you could
Yes.
go back to that page real quick. Gary, when he speaks from the CISA perspective, I believe one of his team members is I believe is a CGIS expert. And Gary, let me know if I'm wrong on that one. But is, an incredibly challenging regulatory model to try to adhere to. How can AI assist with regulatory compliance or identifying maybe network structures, infrastructure, operations that may be out of compliance with CGIS or FERPA or HIPAA, that type of thing, and help IT professionals to identify maybe if they're out of compliance so they can correct it before they get audited and they get pinged?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, that's a great question. So, and I can address a little bit of that right here and now. And I say we've done research, and I personally have done research where not that particular regulation, but I've ingested, I'll give you an example, like NIST cybersecurity framework, right? I've ingested the Zero Trust 800-207, and I've ingested the Department of Defense, which has an awesome Zero Trust framework and implementation guide, which I'm proud that our organization participated in that as one of many organizations, did that. Now, what's cool about this is I've actually ingested and fine-tuned a model, right, that has understanding of these types of interactions. And then what you can do is pose questions to that model, right? And those questions you can pose to the model are, here's my current control configuration. Help me understand where I might be out of compliance with these types of policies and frameworks, right? And I'll chuckle a little when I say this, but the models are pretty good at identifying, I see where you are, I see where you want to be, and here's the delta of that, and here's some recommendations on things you should go do to mitigate those risks. And again, I chuckle a little because even I was a little like, oh my gosh, this is pretty good. And while it could be better, right? This is where the time and the journey come into play, right? Where that fine tuning needs to continuously happen. The model needs to have understanding of it has good understanding because it's only reading what I give it, right? So as you evolve that in providing it more context about your environment and giving it more situational awareness about your environment, and then more awareness about what these policies and really mean to me. And I think the missing ingredient that we're still doing research on is the risk aspect, right? So it's one thing to say, you've checked the box, but I think risk in the form of what's the business impact, what's the likelihood of these things happening, what's the impact to my organization? I think that's sort of the other, if you think about it as an algebra equation, we got to solve for X. And I think that's going to be a really interesting space too. I can talk about it for a while, but there's a lot of promise there on how AI can be used in those ways. So,
absolutely. And Mike, I want to also be respectful to Gary as well. I think as we're coming up, we're kind of wrapping on your time. How much time do you want to save for question and answer?
I could be done in 4 more minutes, and then whatever's left is fine. And if there are questions, happy to take them.
Okay.
So, but great call out there. So let me I'm going to kind of end with this. I think I'll end with an actionable checklist that everyone can take home with them and go and execute on, because I think that's important. But this, I just wanted to splash up, because if you're sitting back now and you're hearing me talk about adversaries using AI and your organization's using AI and developers building with AI, there's 3 main ways I've been working with customers, and I see that organizations are adopting AI, right? And I could say generative AI, but take it as you will. The first is everyone wants to use it, right? So inventory and discovery is key. And we've been helping at Unit 42, I've been helping customers find AI in their environment, understand if it's sanctioned or unsanctioned, and understand the risks associated with using it. It's more than just blocking at the firewall, because when you block AI, if people want to use it, they'll find a way around it, right? They'll find a way around your blocking. They'll use their personal devices. They'll do things, right? So it's important to get a sense of the inventory, the discovery, and evaluate controls and best practices around that. The second is building and integrating. If you have engineers, you have enterprising, innovative people that want to build and integrate, or you want to build applications. I asked this question once. I said, who's building generative AI apps? And maybe a few hands went up at that conference. And then I said, well, who thinks they're building with generative AI apps and you just don't have visibility to it. Everybody's hands went up because there's a good chance you have innovative people that they're either using it, but they may be, bouncing APIs, trying to figure out how to new innovative use cases on how they can integrate. So it's important to understand the pedigree of models, where they came from, how you're building and integrating, how you're writing your code, how you're doing that shift left. So we can help there as well with best practices and benchmarking against, against security controls. And I mentioned a few NIST, OWASP, MITRE, and even, other types of frameworks. And then, of course, taking the sum of the parts, right, and making sure that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Being prepared for adversarial, a use of AI, understanding your attack surface as you're, adopting AI, and then getting governance and controls around that. So these are the three key areas that just, is really important. And, again, Unit 42 can help. I'm happy to, talk more offline about security assessments and helping you on that adoption to your AI, on your AI journey. But this is an actionable checklist. You could, take a screenshot of this or, go home with it. But this is essentially, and this is only 5 quick things. Believe me, there's a lot of sub steps below this, and it can be very complex and overwhelming. But if I had to boil it down to just a couple of key things that I would tell people to go and do, it would be understand, again, think about that inventory, think about usage, know the ins and outs of your data, understand where it's being used in your organization as a security professional. Do you have AI transcribing your meetings? Where does that data go? How's it being used, right? Where's your voice? Where's your data, right? Where is it, right? And then create a list of sanctioned AI and unsanctioned AI. Have you vetted it or have you not? Depending on your industry. I'm working with healthcare providers. We're trying to understand if they can use AI for radiology reports. And they also have people in the front office using AI to balance spreadsheets. So it's important to understand, where you want to put it to use and develop sanctioned versus unsanctioned, right? Get that catalog out there and start to broadcast and communicate is key, right? Company-wide policies and governance and acceptable use of this new technology. Who, what, why, when, how. So I'll pause there, but this is a sort of a take-home list that you can use to at least get started. If you're not already here, use this to sort of put some checks and balances around, adopting AI. So Syed, I'll pause there and take questions or hand it back to the team. And you're on mute, sir, if you're trying to speak.
The mute monster got me. The mute monster got me. I'll give everybody a minute or two and just see if we have some questions come in. I do know as we were speaking that I have about 2 more topics that I'd like to run past you in the future, which will probably need to be whole events. But of course, we can speak about those offline and try to coordinate with you when you might be free.
Absolutely, happy to do it.
Something that I do have a question about is, you mentioned the different AI models. Is there kind of and I would say this for myself as someone who's in IT, but is not necessarily a technologist, is there kind of a dummies guide or a how-to guide of understanding the different AI types or models and how they interact with, say, your network, how they can interact with, let's say your SIM or whatever cybersecurity monitoring resources you have? What are the dependencies there? And, then maybe what are the concerns from that point? But kind of what would be the starting point in trying to understand those different models?
Yeah, so I smiled a little when you asked the question, because you're right, that's a whole webinar by itself, right? That we could probably do. But if I had to give you a fast path, right, I would say, and I'm proud that on Palo Alto Networks, we do have a lot of education that's available. I can make a link available that is a really nice intro that's written so that IT professionals can consume it, right? So it's not quite dummies, but it's a few clicks above that, but doesn't assume you have a PhD in data science either, right? Now, what's nice about that is, and there's others too, and I think, so number one, the challenge with it is that this is moving so quickly that these materials have to they get out of date super quick. But the one thing that is interesting that we've seen some consistency around is, to your point, like the deployment of these models. For example, there's ways to use models that are through a chat-based interface. There's ways to use models that are SaaS-based where you're doing an API, and there's ways to use models where you bring them down and run them on your local machine. And some are easier to detect than others. For example, if you're looking at firewall logs, you can see activity going out to a third-party application where you might be able to enforce some kind of controls or data loss prevention. But if people are using local models, right, you may not have as big a concern about data loss, right? But you do have a concern about, is that model behaving itself? Is that model compromised? It's almost like downloading days of the past where you downloaded a virus inadvertently. Models can be, malware can be embedded inside a model. If you bring it down and run it locally, you could inadvertently be exposing your organization to malware, right? So to your point, there's different things, there's different ways to leverage AI, and there's different things you need to look out for, and they all have different risks. So there is a lot of material out there. Happy to share some links as sort of a one-on-one starter's guide that just to give you a sense of the compare and contrast between them all.
Absolutely. And for anybody on the call, we'll make sure as we provide the recording of this that we'll also include the link that Mike mentioned to, the starter's guide or the how-to guide of, what is AI and what do those different models look like. Since we didn't have any questions come in, I do want to pass it over to Gary. Mike, I appreciate you joining us today. John, I appreciate you bringing the Palo team onto this event. Gary, if you don't mind taking over. Gary is with CISA again, and I think, Gary, you might have had a team member that was able to join us today that is a law enforcement expert. I'm not sure if he was able to come on with you.
He is, and I'll introduce him.
Okay,
I'll give him
fantastic.
an opportunity to speak probably at the end. I've got both of our contact information up there, so I'll let him have an opportunity to introduce himself. He's a little newer to CISA and still kind of getting his feet underneath him. So we'll figure out how that plays out as we go. Let's see if I can share this real quick. All right. So as mentioned before, I am Gary Hopewell. I'm the cybersecurity advisor here in Central Florida, and we're going to talk about some of the things that in fact, it was kind of nice. Mike teed up a lot of what was going on in my slide. So I appreciate the fact that you guys have had an opportunity to hear a little bit about AI. I'm going to talk a little bit, very, very, very briefly, because CISA is federal government, right? We're a little behind when it comes to where industry is with regards to AI. So we'll talk about some of our efforts and what we're doing, but some of the things that we'll talk about will tie in very nicely to what we just heard. So real quick, just my background. I've been with CISA about 1.5 years. Prior to that, I was a 10-year computer scientist for the FBI doing cyber investigations. I'm also retired military. So everything I'm talking about is going to come from a very different perspective. I've come from federal government. So all of my cybersecurity experience, all the things I've ever done are coming from federal government cybersecurity. So it's a little bit of a different take, I think, than you'll hear from a commercial industry. And I think in a lot of ways, they're ahead of where we are. So if you don't know who CISA is, essentially we are an organization that is kind of a small new organization. We're only turning 6 this year. So, our main goal is cybersecurity for the federal government, state and local, tribal, territorial governments, as well as our 16 critical infrastructure partners. And of those 16, our director has basically said, hey, your priorities are going to be water, wastewater, electrical, K-12 schools, and healthcare. And then obviously being a presidential election year, we're also real big into election security this year as well. And if you think about those areas that we're focusing on, it's really areas that are target rich and cyber poor. These are areas that bad guys are typically and historically gone after because of the ease of the networks. A lot of times we're talking about flat networks and getting into to one area and being able to expand out. So we try to focus our efforts on areas that we know are being exploited by APTs, areas that we know are being exploited by threat actors for either ransomware, business email compromise, or things they can monetize. And then areas that, obviously from our perspective as a society are really supporting the base of everything we're doing with water, wastewater, electrical plant generation, and our healthcare systems, right? So we are looking for ways that we can make those organizations more resilient now and into the future. We, as CISA, we want this to be an ongoing relationship with us. We don't want you to invite us in, have us do something, and then say, okay, thanks, we've checked the block, we've met CISA, we'll talk to you never. we want this to be a, hey, let's come back again. Let's do this again in a year. Let's do another assessment. Let's do another tabletop exercise. Let's see what other products we can have from CISA. So we are regionally based. We have we line up exactly to the 10 FEMA regions. So you can see from my perspective, I'm sitting out here in Florida. We're in Region 4. We got the 8 states of the Southeast. If you are across the United States, there is very likely going to be someone just like me, a cybersecurity advisor, in most of the major cities across the whole United States. So there's probably going to be somebody that's going to be within an hour or two of you that's going to be able to do all of the same things that I will talk about today. And the nice thing about that is, again, you get to establish that local relationship. We encourage highly meeting us, learning who we are, getting familiar with our products, getting familiar with the information we can provide you, and using those resources, because we are obviously a great resource for you. As mentioned, we do support critical infrastructure. That's probably our bread and butter. I mean, it's obviously, state and local and federal government is a huge customer, but there's so few of those comparatively compared to our critical infrastructure partners that we spend most of our time working with these folks here. And again, it's kind of hard if you're in an industry in the United States. It's pretty hard to not fall under one of these. So we normally can service just about anybody with all the things we're talking about today. CISA is a non-regulatory, voluntary, and everything we do is no cost. The only cost that you have with CISA is your time and our time with regards to doing the assessments, doing a tabletop, submitting paperwork to get scans done, whatever it is. We don't have any fee for any of our services. So these are opportunities for you as a customer to reach out to CISA and get things essentially for free. So we'll talk about some of the threats, and this is going to lean a little bit heavily on previous and current work with the FBI. They release a report every April, the IC3 report that comes out, which basically is a year in review of crime from the previous year. So we're going to talk about a couple of the heavy hitters, and you've already heard about them in the previous slides, right? There's a reason that we talk about these things over and over and over, because they're the same crimes that are the number 1, number 2, number 3 crimes year after year after year, because they just work. So we're not going to lean heavily at all really on the terrorism or warfare side. We're going to talk, you're talking more like an APT threat there. Something like a Volt Typhoon that's working our way into our critical infrastructure. Certainly something we are working on, and we have teams that are doing that type of thing. But the threats that we're really seeing day in, day out live right there in the crime and the insider area. The folks that are trying to monetize our information in some way or another. Okay. So the criminals will go after us in a couple different ways. They'll come after us as people. And I think this lines up very nicely to AI, because if you look at all these things here and all the ways that you can scoop up this information and feed it to either a large language model or some sort of machine learning capability, and have it the ability to, as Mike mentioned, sort of become a person. When you're talking about a business email compromise, or you're talking about a good spear phishing campaign, the last thing we want to do is give those models more opportunities to determine who we are. So in this case, we're highly suspicious and highly recommending we really tone down what we're putting out there, what's available online and what we can find about ourselves, because the more you have that's out there, that's your voice, that's your likeness, pictures and information and stuff about you and your family and your business and your goings on and your hobbies, that becomes a major target for you to be either spearphished or have your staff become part of a business email compromise. So you always want to pay attention to this. I know we talk about this all the time. I think in the industry, we don't want to be oversharers. There's always people that are going to overshare, but this is a way that the bad guys are looking at us. I don't exist on LinkedIn. I do exist, though. I exist way more than I want to. I got a comment in there that said I don't exist on LinkedIn, and I don't for a reason. And so we can cover that. But yeah, bad guys are doing this. They just like us. They know how to use OSINT. So obviously, with all of this stuff and things like the fact that people want to do a good job, right? Bad guys will lean on the fact that you want to do a good job. You get an email in your box, your boss says, I need you to do this. I got a task I'm going to do. We're task driven. We're goal driven. We get this thing we want to do. We see an email that looks legitimate and we get compromised by it. Usually it only takes a couple seconds if you were to just slow down and think, man, is this really real? Is this what's going on? And but it doesn't happen, right? Folks just kind of click through it and it becomes a problem. I saw a great suggestion at a panel a few weeks ago from the DoD. If you haven't ever worked in the DoD, they at least before, probably still, they used to have little cards by our desk that if you ever got a bomb threat, it was a checklist of what you would do as you are on the phone with somebody with a bomb threat, right? Those are important things. What questions you should ask, what you should listen for, basically so you don't panic in the middle of a bomb threat call. And he said they had developed the same type of chart, but for phishing emails. And essentially it was, if you ever saw an email that came in that was at all questionable, it was sort of a step-by-step. How do I keep myself from getting compromised? What are the things I can look at? And he said the biggest thing that it did was it slowed their staff down. It made them go through a few steps to go, I don't know if I should click on this or not. And it greatly increased the amount of emails that were sent to their security center for evaluation, but it greatly decreased the amount of phishing that they were susceptible to. So that's kind of an interesting concept. It's usually just the things that we talk about here, and as an investigator for a long time, I've talked to a lot of people, interviewed a lot of people about how that attack took place, and almost every one of them says the second they click, they get a moment of clarity that says, "Oh, I shouldn't have done that." Right? So it's how do we slow our folks down and keep them from getting compromised? Again, you heard Mike talk about business email compromise. This was the number one crime by monetary value for the last 7 years. It got displaced this year by investment fraud, but this is still number two. This is rampant, and I'm not going to cover too much about how it works or sort of what's going on, but definitely you're going to see an uptick when AI affecting this. You're going to see bad guys, because they get in these networks and they try to become that person. And there's no better way to become that person than if you can impersonate their likeness, their voice, or impersonate their ability to speak to their staff and what times of day they speak. You add that on to the previous part about human vulnerabilities and doing some OSINT on them, and now you have a pretty good solution, maybe 90-95%. Of how to become that person once you've managed to compromise them and you're inside of their network, making that a much more complicated and difficult problem for their staff to try to deal with. So in addition to our human vulnerabilities, bad guys will go after us from a technical perspective as well. I usually have a Shodan slide here, but I was trying to make sure I had enough time to cover. So if you know what Shodan is, it's basically Google for servers and routers and switches on the internet. They're using that just like CISA is to try to find vulnerabilities, tell you about it. They're using that to find those vulnerabilities. And what they're trying to do is trying to work their way to this deep web area. They want to get to the area where the good stuff is. What's in your Gmail, what's behind your Facebook login, what's your crypto password, all the things they can do that you can't just Google from, the very small part of the internet. They want to get down that one level below, behind the password protected areas, behind the multi-factor authentication, and be able to root that information out and monetize you in some way. And there's numbers of ways to monetize you. And then that information will fall down one level farther, end up on dark webs, get sold off. Maybe bad guys are buying credentials on there to attack you with. It doesn't really matter. That middle part kind of flows forward and backward, where guys will get that information and roll it back up and use it against you, or they will move it down and sell it for profit as well. So with having, the ability to mine Shodan, look for compromised computers, send out, ransomware campaigns in compromised computers. Ransomware is obviously the one that we're looking at. That's always the sort of the dominant problem that we're dealing with right now on a weekly basis. My colleague Neil, who's on the phone, again, our law enforcement cybersecurity advisor, also is in Orlando with me. CISA does a number, and I say a number, it kind of depends weekly, but we do a number of proactive phone calls every week to customers who have been compromised with ransomware and don't yet know it, and we will reach out proactively to try to get them to pull that off their machines. We have contracts with some third parties and some folks that are giving us tips about potential clients that have a C2 malware or ransomware on their machine that's beaconing out, it's sending information, but they have not yet gotten to ransom that machine. That's a good problem we have for CISA, is the fact that our bad guys have compromised so many machines, they don't ransom them right away. They get in, they look around, they figure out what they can steal first, and then once they've decided what they can steal, what the ransom is going to be, then they have the opportunity to ransom you. So we have a little bit of an opportunity in there where bad guys live in networks to try to do a proactive notification for those folks. So we do as many as we can. I think we probably average 3 or 4 a week each, and if I had to guess, there's probably 25 or 30 just in our region that we do on a weekly basis. There's a constant battle for CISA, is trying to get in front of this and do our best to slow this ransomware threat down. And as ransomware guys are going, obviously from our perspective, we want to do patching as soon as we can. As Mike mentioned, bad guys are out there and looking at vulnerabilities. How can they use those vulnerabilities against us? Whether they're using AI or whether they're using a simple somebody added that new CVE to Metasploit, they're having the ability to monetize and weaponize those exploits very quickly now. So obviously, we want to patch our systems as soon as we can and get ourselves off that list. I mean, anything we can do from an endpoint perspective, RDP, VPNs should all be multi-factored. Bad guys love non-multi-factored external access to your network. We want to be careful about our emails that come in. We're not enabling macros. We're not opening unknown PDFs. Seen a lot of drive-by downloads now where folks are searching for PDFs for websites for law forms or financial forms. They find the one they want, they download it. As it turns out, it's not really a PDF. It's a JavaScript exploit that's now C2 beaconing out of their network. So we want to be careful with PDFs as well. All right. In addition to, and again, here's my one and only AI plug for CISA. We have a whole presentation on AI that we have, but I wanted to sort of just highlight this here and saying, CISA is just, and I say just now, it's August. We hired a chief of AI earlier this month. So we finally now have a department head, type that is going to be looking at AI from our perspective. We already have an AI sort of roadmap that exists, but as part of hiring our new AI chief, they're going to be hiring additional federal resources that are AI trained, AI specialists. They're going to be able to work this problem with us. And obviously AI has a number of functions here you can kind of see on this slide. And I think Mike did a fantastic job talking about how AI has a couple different components. You got the machine learning aspect of it where, maybe the camera systems in your organization are able to identify people, guys with backpacks on, or the blue car in the parking lot, rather than you having to scrub through all of your camera footage. That machine learning thing is kind of amazing. And you think of all the number of ways that you can use that both positively and negatively. Very powerful tool there. And then obviously the large language models, which I think is what most people see day to day with AI, is our chat GPTs, and what gets fed into those from your organization. What are your folks, what are they feeding into those large language models that are public? Because once you feed it in there, now it's part of that large language model. And CISA, from our perspective, has some policies in place, that if we want to use AI, we have to sign some agreements, and we're not allowed to use our internal documentation. We're not allowed to do any sort of meeting recordings, any of that type of stuff. So we're being very cautious about how we're dipping our toes into AI. But I can assure you that at all the levels of CISA, we are very aware of how it's going to impact both the positive and the negative side of cybersecurity, and it's something that we're concerned about. So in addition to the things that we always talk about, with regards to ransomware, CISA is recommending 15-character passwords at this point. Again, as Mike mentioned, their desktop computers, even basic desktops at this point with graphics cards, are very powerful machines. So you start adding that up to the supercomputer level or quantum computing, and passwords need to get longer. So we're encouraging 15 characters at this point. We're encouraging multi-factor at every possible opportunity. What is multi-factor? I think we all know. Yes, sir.
Can you go back to your last slide?
I sure can.
We're seeing, just as a reseller partner, we're seeing some conflicting things depending on different compliance frameworks, state requirements, and then industry suggestions
Yep.
as it relates to password, password guidance, password discipline. I guess how does the individual, technologist for a, city, a school, or a private entity, what did they suggest or what should they pay attention to most? Of course,
Well, I
if
mean,
it's state mandated, that's kind of where they
yeah.
go
So
first.
that's the
But
key, right
outside
there.
of that,
Yep, there's your key. Is if they've got a mandate, it doesn't matter what CISA is recommending. If they've got a policy they have to follow, and that's what they're being mandated to follow, then we're clearly going to recommend what that is. But aside, if you don't have any of that, CISA as an organization is recommending 15 character passwords. But we're not a regulatory agency. We don't have the ability to say, hey, you're not following this. That's what you're going to be doing. Now, federal government's going to go that way because we are an organization the federal government will end up following. So they'll be migrating that direction. And obviously, I think NIST just came out with a big change as far as password management and what they recommend and the amount of times that we change them and how that goes. I mean, obviously, we hear about all those different things all the time. You should change them every 90 days. Oh no, if you don't change them every 90 days, that encourages people to write them down and all the different. Because you're right, there's all kinds of sort of confusing guidance to that. And I will tell you that we won't stand in the way of whatever guidance it is you want to put in place. But if from a length perspective, we're certainly at 15 characters, and we're certainly encouraging password managers at this point because they're getting so long that we're getting, you're going back to the days of people writing them down or putting them in an Excel sheet on your desktop, and we're trying to avoid that. So, certainly want longer passwords. We certainly don't want password reuse, and we certainly want multi-factor in every possible place. I think we all know what multi-factor is, something you are, something you have, something pick at least two of those. Um, you know, this should be enabled in every possible place. CISA also has a zero trust architecture that's out there and available as far as a resource for how you would build that going forward. And as part of that, sort of micro transactions going forward, you want to multi-factor at different layers as best you can. The website I have up there is just a resource if you're looking for how you would multi-factor a particular, does a particular website or service support multi-factor? If yes or no, what types, whether SMS or hardware or soft token, and then there's usually some directions on how to actually enable it. So if you're ever trying to help out your family or maybe coworkers, hey, here's how you turn on multi-factor for your bank. That's a great resource for to kind of aim on that way. So as far as cybercrime goes, cybercrime's on the rise every year. I mean, and the thing is, I'm gonna jump all the way to the bottom there. 22% increase over 2022. So remember, these stats came out in 24. The stats are for 23. So this is a 2023 recap, but it was up 22% over 2023. And I almost promise you that it'll be up 20+% over 2024. It's been doing that every year because cybercrime isn't slowing down. And the one disadvantage that we have, as compared to sort of, like Palo Alto having some crime stats in there, and I'm going to bet those are probably more accurate because they're seeing it from a wider area. These are what are reported, right? These are just reported to IC3. So from the Bureau's perspective, these are what we know about. So, if you can imagine the amount of things that are happening that we don't know about, that are happening either worldwide or in areas that, that we don't actually have. For example, I did a ransomware investigation a few years ago where we had some inside activity with regards to the actors and what they were actually doing. So we had a pretty good sense of how many people were actually reporting publicly when they got ransomware, and it was around the 25% level. So, that's one of those things where with a whole bunch of data over a pretty large ransomware organization, we knew that ransomware was vastly underreported. So it's not going anywhere. Cybercrime is not going anywhere. And I think, you throw AI on top of this, it's just going to make the actors more efficient at what they're doing. So we'll go through some of the things that CISA has in place, that you can do for your organization if you're looking for some of our assistance in this. First of all, we highly encourage taking a look at what you have. If you don't either do an audit or an assessment or some sort of tabletop or get a team together and sort of evaluate some of the things you have, you can't figure out what's wrong, right? So if you don't know what's broken, you can't fix it. So let's take an opportunity to put a spotlight on it and see if we can find some areas for improvement. All of the things you do with CISA, if you'd like them to be, or can be protected under our PCI program. Essentially, everything you give us is voluntary, and all the information you give us is voluntary, is protected from FOIA requests, like Florida Sunshine Laws, civil litigation. We're not reporting up to Department of Energy. We're not reporting up to any state agencies. CISA doesn't. It's not our role, right? Our role is cybersecurity resilience between you and us. And so all the things you give us stay inside of CISA, and that's really the key there. So it's a kind of a softer approach. You can hand this stuff over and know that it's only going to stay between us. So we have a number of services available. Some of them are done, sort of at the regional level. When you think about that map that I showed earlier, with the local folks, right, in those areas. Some of them are delivered from our headquarters unit. And now we're still going to be sort of your inject to that. We're basically your front door to CISA, your local CISA rep. So, don't hesitate to reach out and ask us for stuff. But yeah, we're going to talk about some of these things here as we go. So all of the things that I talk about from an assessment perspective are in our CSAT tool. And this is a tool that was developed between Department of Homeland Security and Idaho National Labs. This is a free downloadable tool. Everything you do here, you can do without us. So if I talk about an assessment, you're welcome to pull this tool down, pull it up. There's all kinds of guidance and how-tos and explanations of all the questions. They're all in this cybersecurity framework assessments. You can do these on your own, or we always encourage, because again, we're a no cost type of organization, you call us in and we'll sit down with you and go through this assessment with you. Remember too, nothing we do is an audit. I'm not gonna ask for documentation. I'm not looking for proof. This is for you guys. We will do these assessments with you. It gives you an opportunity to take a look at some areas maybe you haven't considered before, and maybe have some areas that you can take forward to your C-suite and say, hey, look at the CISA evaluated this. We found some things we think we should work on. Do we have the ability to maybe get some funding or additional personnel to work on this? So highly encourage going through these assessments either with us, or if you don't want to, which we understand, without us. So the first one that I'll talk about just briefly. Yes, sir.
Can you go back to your previous slide?
I sure can.
What is a national cyber asset? Does the Department of Homeland Security desktop software, does that refer to your cyber assets, or would that be a consumer and individual entity?
It can be a consumer and individual entity. I mean, this is it is developed by DHS because again, our number one primary customer is federal government. Like they're probably our smallest, the least number, right? The number of federal agencies is greatly dwarfed by that of state, local, and our critical infrastructure partners, but they are still our number one customer overall. So all of the things that we do and all the things we develop are built to protect the federal government's infrastructure. But yes, this is available 100% to anybody that wants to use it. So our cyber resilience review is our sort of largest assessment. It was developed basically for a Fortune 500 bank. So if you think about the amount of folks and regulations and things that are taking place to run a Fortune 500 bank, it's a very wide assessment. It covers 10 domains of the NIST cybersecurity framework. And across those domains, it doesn't go terribly deep, but it goes a little bit deep in each one. So it's kind of a wide assessment and covers a lot of areas that some organizations that maybe don't have a large cybersecurity staff probably wouldn't think about having as part of their IT security. When we do these assessments, we do them as it lists here as a critical service focus. So we want to say, tell us your critical service. What is it that's running your organization that keeps your business running? What is it that if you wake up that day and it's down, that's the worst day of your life? What can we do to keep that service running? Okay. And across that, we look at those 4 items across there: the people, the information, the technology, and the facilities for that thing. If it's running on backup power, where are you getting it from? Is it a generator? Do you have gas for it? Where's that coming from? How can you get more? Down here in Florida, we're concerned about hurricanes. How long can you run a building? If you get a hurricane takes out your building and that critical service is running on backup power, how long can you run it? How do you get more power? who has access to facilities, what kind of credentials do they have to have, what kind of background checks are you doing on your folks, what kind of information is flowing through there, how is it protected, is it encrypted at rest, is it encrypted in motion, what do the switches and routers look like, what are the age of those things, are they patchable, are we looking at 0 days because we have old equipment. So it's a very comprehensive assessment. It looks for a lot of different ways. Really good to go through. It takes the better part of a day to sit down and go through. So it does have a time commitment to it, but it's something that we do regularly with a number of organizations. A little shorter assessment we have. So CISA a couple of years ago took a look at all the assessments we've done, and we've got a number of assessments that are inside of CSET. There's probably 50 in there, and of all the assessments and all the results that we did, they went back and said, okay, let's find out where our problem areas are. So they went back and evaluated all of them and said, okay, these are the areas that we're seeing people are having problems with, or the areas that are the most impactful to our cybersecurity. They distilled that down to a very simple IT OT assessment called our cybersecurity performance goals. It's 38 questions. Takes a couple hours to go through. It's not going to get you all the way there. It's like horseshoes and hand grenades of cybersecurity. It's like an 80% solution, but it's the type of things that if you're not doing, you're really going to be susceptible to some of these attacks that we're all very aware of. So we highly encourage you to go through this, take a look at it, get some areas where you have some potential improvement there. The nice thing about this assessment is that the report at the end comes in this little format here where you get cost, impact, and complexity. So it's kind of like a roadmap, not only in addition to, are we going to tell you where we think you have some areas for improvement, but where maybe you should start. High impact, low cost, or, low cost and low impact, but also low complexity. We can knock that out quick. Maybe it's just some changes with our team, or maybe some documentation. So it's a great way to take that report and be able to have some actionable items going forward. We also have a ransomware readiness assessment inside of CSET. We talked about ransomware earlier, and this one focuses highly on the things that actors are doing to exploit organizations with regards to ransomware. So talking about your endpoints, you can talk about your VLAN separation, your phishing, your password rules, all those areas where ransomware tends to be a problem. This assessment will kind of go after. So it's a great assessment if you want to kind of get an idea of where you think you'd be sitting for ransomware. One area that we highly, highly, highly encourage you to look at this. So this is another free service we have. This is done at our headquarters unit. This is done out of headquarters, but it's our vulnerability scanning program. So again, no cost. You sign up for it. You provide us your external facing IP infrastructure, and we'll scan it on a weekly basis. And we scan that based off of our known exploited vulnerability catalog. So we have a catalog on our website where if we know of bad actors using vulnerabilities in the wild, we're tracking it, and then we're using that information to scan our partners. So you'll get a weekly scan from us. We'll send you an encrypted PDF that has the information about what we found for that week, if we found anything. A lot of times we hear that we get people in our scanning program. We find some vulnerabilities pretty early on. They're able to fix them, and then they'll go dark for a few months because they won't hear anything as far as vulnerabilities from us, which is great. That's great news, right? They're not hearing anything, but you want to hear it from us before you'd hear it from a bad guy knocking on the outside of your external facing IP infrastructure. So, it's one of those things where, it's a free look. You may have your own scanning service. You may be paying for somebody for this. And we're certainly not advocating that we're any better than that, but it's another set of eyes taking a look at your infrastructure if you would like it. We also have the same thing there, but if you've got web apps, we've got a web app scanner as well. So we have a number of training resources available on our website, and I say a number, it's more than I can possibly count. That's IT, that's OT. That's basic. It's a little more advanced. We have classes that you can sign up for that you can do in person. I mean, obviously, we're not going to pay you to fly there, but we'll give you the class for free. But you got to get yourself there. So, number of training resources available, and we know that a lot of folks are like know before kind of shops where they've already got their internal IT training taken care of. But if you're looking for something to augment, or you're looking for something that maybe you don't have currently, our website is a great resource for that. Another resource that we're providing, and again, this can be with us, or if you want to do it on your own, our website has pre-canned tabletop exercises, ready to pull off the shelf. So it has a scenario already built. It has the questions. It has the after actions. It got the lessons learned. The whole scenario sort of laid out. You just go in and change the name of who you are and kind of some of the fill-in things. And these are pre-canned, ready to go. These are both physical and cyber. So I don't think I talked about it early on, but CISA has a couple of main components. Number one is obviously it's in our name. The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. So we do cybersecurity for sure, but we also have a major physical security component to CISA as well. So everywhere you see that there's a cybersecurity advisor, there is very likely a physical security advisor as well. And when you think physical security, think gates, guns, guards, cameras, roads, bollards, fences, all those types of things to physically secure your facilities. And they have assessments as well. So if you're interested in doing a physical security assessment of your organization, you can also contact CISA for that. And we've got those available at no cost as well. But these tabletops are built to be both physical and cyber, or we've got some that are together that will do both. They'll either go from cyber into physical or physical into cyber, however you want to do it. Additionally, if you don't like any of the ones that are on there, or you want to invite us in and have them do it, we can develop these tabletop exercises and come in and do them with your team. A little higher level up, but once you've sort of been down the road with CISA services for a while, we do have a number of services we have available that get a little higher level. So in this case, it's a remote penetration test. So we'll spend 1 week offsite. They'll try to do some penetrations into your organization that includes a phishing test as well. One step past this, we have an actual 2-week penetration test where it's a full red team. So they'll try to do an offsite, and then they will do 1 week on site. Again, these are no cost services. You got to get in the queue to get them, and you got to kind of line up and get yourself on the list. But these are available to our critical infrastructure partners as no cost services. Are looking for ways to get their organization taken a look at. Another thing that Mike did a really nice job of teeing up for me. How do we move security to the left? And this is what CISA's got. This is what we're working on for this, called Secure by Design, Secure by Default. We're working with manufacturers, and I'm certain Palo Alto is probably already on our list, to push out products that are more secure from by default, right? They're coming out secure from the organization. They're coming out with no username and password set. You've got to set a good password. They're coming out with multi-factor already enabled. We're not using memory unsafe languages so we can get rid of buffer overflows. Lots of things that we can do. We've got partners that are signing up for this program, and then hopefully over the next few years we'll continue to work with them and get them to push out products that are more secure. Right when they delivered, rather than sending out a hardening guide, maybe they send out softening guides, because the products are locked down from by default, and we get users to lower the ability or lower the security a little bit, just enough to make their product work for what they need, rather than sending out these IoT cameras that are admin and giving bad guys the ability to come up with a 500,000 node botnet with very little effort. So highly encourage you to take a look at our website. We have a ton of resources out there. I also highly encourage, if you're in the Florida area, contact me, and I'm happy to do something personal with you. We can meet up or get you the other Florida rep. But if you're not in Florida, if you're national, I would highly encourage you to take a look at our website, find your CISA region, email them, and find your local CSA. Meet them in advance. You want to know these guys in advance. You want to put a name with a face and take advantage of some of these things that we have available to you at no cost. Just like most places, we do have a 24-hour watch center. If you can't get a hold of a CISA rep, you can call CISA Central. We got a phone number. We got an email. They're more than happy to help you. And I'll throw out my contact information. In addition, I've got Neil Arnold's contact information on there. Again, he's in Orlando as well. He is our CISA law enforcement liaison, and I'll do a quick introduction of what they do, and then I'll let Neil jump in real quick. But we've hired specific law enforcement liaisons inside of CISA. We've got 2 in our region, 1 here in Orlando, 1 in Atlanta, and they kind of break up the region that way. I think we've got another maybe 5 or 10 across the whole country, and they're kind of adding them as they go. And they are our primary inroad between state, local, and federal law enforcement and CISA. So if we're looking for all the things that I talked about from a CISA perspective, if you're looking for those and you're a law enforcement agency, we're really trying to funnel you in through Neil to make sure that your needs are met, because Neil's former law enforcement, has the experience of law enforcement, has the experience of cybersecurity, and is a great resource for that. So I'll let him chime in if he wants to add anything to that. But yeah, we're adding those as we go. As CISA gets, we continue to grow. We're finding these experts that we need in certain areas and adding them to our pile.
Neil, you still there?
I am. I'll be respectful of time because I know it's getting noon on the East Coast over here. I don't really have much to add. Just that I am embedded with the FBI. Fortunately, with Gary already being there in the past, it made the transition a little easier. But we have the ability in my role and across the country now to where if we're seeing a particular ransomware group that is very active, and we can reach out within the FBI or the Secret Service or wherever, and we can get some more recent IOCs, those types of things, and pass them on to industry. That's related to that particular ransomware group or whatever it may be. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get timely information out there quickly to stakeholders. And I can pass that up right on to Gary and other people who then can shoot it out to all their partners and stakeholders. But yes, I am here for all of law enforcement. And there's 2 of us in Region 4. So there's 2 of us for about 8 states. So you can imagine we're kind of busy, but I'm here for all of law enforcement. Just to kind of open that line of communication between law enforcement, federal, state, all those types of things. So thanks, Gary.
Thanks, Neil. I appreciate you being here, and I know sitting through all this for 10 seconds of talking, but I think it's important that you get your at least your voice out there and let people know you exist.
Absolutely. Thank you to everybody.
Gary, Neil, I appreciate your time, and I know we have pretty much everybody that stayed on with us as we've gone over time. I'm not sure if anybody has questions. I don't see anything in the chat. But we will have resources made available. I think Gary will have a publicly permitted version of his slides that we'll be able to provide once we also provide the recording. Correct, Gary?
Yeah, I can give you some slides.
Okay. And we'll also make sure that Neil's contact information is included. John, if you can work with Mike to get us some of the training materials regarding the AI resources, we can include those as well. And of course, please feel free to reach out to us at DOF. Solutions@DOF Creations with any types of questions. You can reach us on LinkedIn. We appreciate everybody and thank you for joining. And Rob, appreciate the compliment there. Thank you.